Father, you said before we started rolling something fascinating, and I'd ask you to please expound on it. But you said that it's likened to an abusive marriage, this tyranny.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you? I thought that was fascinating, and I totally agree with it. But can you expound on what you were talking about with that?
Yeah, I did that series, which I'm not sure if you had a chance to take a look at, but I did that series on how diabolic psychology and communist psychology are basically, they're the same. I mean, they line out.
Right.
But one of the things I didn't make the connection, which I only did just about a week and a half ago, which is a sign I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes on this stuff. But it basically, what it dawned on me is I had done this conference on disappropriation, and in there I talk about how demons try and establish an abusive relationship with us. So if you actually look in the psychology manuals where they talk about the structure that domestic abuse cases where one, like the husband is abusing the wife or what have you, that psychologically, even physically, sometimes it's psychologically, it has a very specific structure. And there's two essential elements to it. One is he says things to hurt her psychologically. Right. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. In fact, if it's true, that's good. That's helpful. But
that's
if it's
gaslighting,
not true,
isn't it?
It is. It's exactly it. You gaslight. So you basically, and even if it's a lie, you just keep telling them because the goal is, so you abuse them from the outside, but the second component is the goal is to get them to accept that it's true.
Right.
Because once they accept that it's true, then internally they have to fight their own emotional states, their instability internally, and plus the fact that you're abusing them. And that basically means you're weakened and then they can control you. And that's the goal.
You diminish their self-esteem and you got them. They're in your control. Right.
That's exactly it. So, and we're actually seeing that play itself out in our own country, right? In the United States. So for example, how have we seen that? Running around calling every white person a racist, right?
White supremacist.
You're a white supremacist, or because you're white, you're automatically a racist.
Right.
Or, and we're also seeing this, even seeing this in the church. You'll see them say things like, well, if you basically want to hold to the traditional Catholic faith, then you're basically a heretic. Or if you don't accept this, then you're a heretic, which is stuff that's, the church herself didn't accept in the past. So the point being is that they say things in order to, so they're trying to establish an abusive relationship. Now, in an abusive relationship, and this is something which, once I started noticing this dynamic, because I noticed that that's what demons do with people in diabolic obsession. They attack the person internally. They make them feel a certain way. They give them certain thoughts. And it's basically, I started realizing this is just an abusive relationship.
Right.
And so then I started researching a little bit more. This was years ago. I started researching a little bit more. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with someone who's abusive? And it was very revealing. They said, you never, ever address the topic of abuse. So for example, if the husband comes in and says to the wife, you're fat, you're ugly, you're not keeping the house clean, the kids are not being taken properly care of, etc. They say you never, ever address that topic. You never say to them, you never say to the abuser, yes, I do. I try and take care of the children, because as soon as you do that, you have legitimized that as a topic of discussion.
Interesting.
And so, and this is exactly what the conservatives are getting sucked into in our culture. Like, you're a racist. I'm not a racist. Where did you get this idea? I'm right. You don't even address the topic, because as soon as you do, you've legitimized the discussion. So, but all the manuals say is that, and this is what you do, you never address the topic of abuse, you address the abuser. So they would say, if you have a problem, like for example, the husband has a problem with the wife's weight. If you have a problem with my weight, that's your problem, not mine. Right. Okay. Now, in relationship to the conservatives and dealing with what's going on, I think, in our culture, the approach has to be a shift away from these topics, because they're controlling the narrative through that.
Exactly.
You have to stop talking about that. Don't even go down the race rabbit hole. Don't even go down these other issues, etc. Start talking about, for example, if they say, well, you're a racist, that's when you need to just stop and look at the person and say, have you always had a problem with accusing people of things that they're not guilty of? Have you always had a problem of lying to people? Have you always had a problem of cheating, etc.? You address them, because then it actually shifts to where the real problem is. The real problem is in relationship to them, not or trying to gaslight you, get the attention on you, beat you up so that they can get you under control. And that's where you have to say, wait a minute, have you always had this? You have to go back after them. And I think if we start doing that both politically, but if we also do it even within the church, have you always had a problem with not accepting the church's teaching, etc.? If we'd start addressing it that way, then I think that it would make a lot more headway, and it would also take away from them the ability to control the narrative.
I love how you work the word cheating in, by the way.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, how else?
It just kind of snuck in there, and you could have.
I don't know what you could have been referring to, Father.
I know.
I mean, as they say, this is something that Stevie Wonder can see. You don't have to be
exactly.
So in fact, and actually, one of the ways that we know we're in an abusive relationship is that the abuser will lie to the person, and the person knows that the abuser is lying.
Right.
But the abuser also knows that the person knows that he's lying to them.
Exactly.
But their attitude is, it doesn't matter. You still have to listen to it, take it, and operate as if it's true.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's what we're living in. That is classic communist behavior, which we're seeing in our culture.
Yeah. Now, Father, we threw out this very intriguing title for a reason. And I don't want to go too long without the audience getting to hear where we came up with this. You had said something as we were getting ready for the show here. And this is something you heard directly during a session, during an exorcism, correct? Could you break this down for us and tell us, because this is, I think, is a very hopeful statement. It's a very hopeful title, because as you're describing this, the abusive relationship, which I think we all would agree, yeah, that's what this feels like very much. It's abusive relationship with our government, with those in the church in some levels. I mean, it's just an abusive time. And a lot of people are just crying out, Lord, would you please step in? And I know I speak for a lot of people when I say that, Lord, please just step in. I know I need your grace, but man, things just seem so off kilter.
And I always add, can you do it this afternoon?
Yeah.
I don't want to ask too much, Lord, but the clock is ticking there. So. But you said this, and I just think it really speaks probably a lot of hope to a lot of people. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So basically, I'm working on this one case that has been going on for a protracted period of time. And there's a specific set of reasons why it's actually going on. And that has nothing to do with the person who's possessed. In fact, she is quite saintly in my own view of things, although I never let her know that. So, but she, in this case, Beelzebub is the possessor, and it's another name for Beelzebub is just another name for Satan. So, in this case, during one of the sessions, let me back up just a bit. This case is actually revolving around certain issues that are going on in the church. I'm not at liberty to talk about them, at least at this point. That would be something I'd have to have my bishop's permission to speak on. But it's one of those things where it revolves around certain issues within inside the church. And so he, at one point during one of the sessions, when the beatings got particularly bad, he just starts crying out of the blue. And so I stopped and I commanded him, what's your problem? And he just said, he's about to take my power away from me. Yes. And he's actually referring to whenever they say he, that refers to God. And in this particular case, it was specifically God the Father. Or when they say she, it refers to Our Lady, because their names, even the word God or Mary or things like that, are sacred, and so it causes them pain just to say it. They'll say them under duress if you force them to say it, but otherwise they always give some oblique reference to them because they don't want to actually use those terms. And he says he's about to take my power away, and he was actually talking about within the church primarily. So even though I think that's true in relationship to the geopolitical situation, by application, which I'll mention here in a minute, I think that it's primarily this darkness that we're experiencing in the church, where just for people to lead a solid Catholic life, just to find a good priest who performs the sacraments, is getting in an orthodox, reverent way, is getting harder and harder and harder. The bishops are clamping down on priests and stuff that are trying to do the right thing. That stuff is getting harder and harder. But as that continues, though, it also means that he says he's about to take my power away. We don't know when that's going to occur, but we also know, I think, that that's one of the reasons why I think they're in this panic. This is one of the reasons why I think that, like, they tend to overextend themselves or do certain things or say certain things, even geopolitically. And even within the church, they'll say things that are just like, I think you'd need to prep people of, another couple of decades before you would normally say that kind of a thing, but They don't. They're just saying these things. And so as a result of that, I think the reason is because the demons are getting hasty because they realize their time is getting short. And so they've got to do something. And there's two reasons that we know it's getting short is because of this panic that we're seeing them. They're literally scrambling the geopolitical situation, the geopolitical sphere, and even to some degree within the church. I mean, I think that as time goes on, I think it's going to be kind of clear that, the fact that they're trying to clamp down, you can edit this out if you think it's necessary, but the fact that they're trying to clamp down on the old right, I think is an indicator that they're getting worried that that generation that brought in all the changes is now dying. And so they're getting towards the end. But I also think it's also the demons know that their time is limited. So they're trying to clamp down on anything possibly that they can, even within the church. And also we're going to start seeing the governments getting more and more tyrannical. For example, what's going on in Australia is just completely off the charts. This is an indication that they're overplaying their hand, but the reason they're overplaying their hand is because, and they're bluffing so much and they're doing all these things and they're lying is all because of the fact that their time is very short. So when he said he's about to take my power away, that means it's primarily pertains to the church. But as we know, because the church is the mystical body of Christ, and since the mystical body of Christ is the means of all grace, it means that the Catholic Church is the divinely established means of salvation. It's also the means, it's also that through which all grace comes into the world, right? So that means, and even if I'm not saying Protestants don't get grace, it just means if they come, it comes mediating the church, which is the mystical body of Christ. That means that once the church, this starts to get its act together, possibly one of two things could happen. One is that the demons will then become vengeful and use their power in the political sphere to go after the church. That's up to God to determine whether he allows that or not. Or it's going to mean that there's going to be a flooding of grace in relationship to even the geopolitical situation. And so things will drastically change. So, but anyway, the point being is that the demons seem to indicate it's short, it's coming. We also know this a little bit because Our Lady said, I believe it was at Fatima, she said, just about the time it looks like the whole world is taken over by communism, he said, that's when God will intervene. And it looks like we're there. I mean, the fact that the deep state worldwide was able to shut down the worldwide economy in less than 2 weeks, worldwide economy in less than 2 weeks, tells you that they're there. I mean, so that all being said, that's a good sign though, because it tells us that the better days are coming. This means we're going through a short period here though, where we have to do a few things. One, obviously we have to continue praying, do prayer and penance so that we can weather this well. But it also means, I think with something we actually talked a little bit about on one of the other prior grace forces, which is you have to keep the course, keep your focus, especially because you notice this even with demons right before they get expelled, there's kind of this look that they get where there's this panic, just as you were mentioning, Father, they get this panic, like I'm just about to get kicked out, and then boom, they get kicked out. They're kind of in that mode, but that's the time when you have to just keep at it, just keep grinding the session out, just keep hammering them, because if you just keep doing it, then you'll get through it, and then the liberation comes on the other side. It's the same thing here. People just have to hunker down in their spiritual lives and just be very focused and maintain their perseverance through this process. And God will give them the grace if they're seriously trying to do that.
I don't like to predict anything because every time I do, it's the exact opposite. So I ain't no prophet for sure.
Yeah, exactly. You could be like the guy that started the Jehovah's Witnesses. He predicted the end of the world like 5 times.
That's right. Yeah. But I said that first because I want to say this. I'm sure you agree that this year St. Joseph is significant. I was just with Father Calloway a couple of days ago, and boy, what the work that he's done to help us all to align ourselves or to devote ourselves to St. Joseph. I mean, he didn't say anything in the Bible and he gets kind of forgotten. And But you know, do you have any thoughts on that, Father, about the role he's played? Because I've also heard, and this is just conspiracy theory and everything, but December 8th is the end of the year of St. Joseph. And more than one person has said December 8th might be something. I don't know. But do you have anything?
Maybe. You know, it's, like you said, it's hard to predict.
I don't like to predict.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can tell you this. First of all, I very much appreciate all the work that Father Calloway has done, and I'm very happy to see that he's taking that up and actually doing something with that, and promoting Saint Joseph, who is a terror of demons, but he's one of the most powerful. But I can tell you what did happen in one case that I had, which actually tells you something a little bit about the role of Saint Joseph. He right towards the end, before this woman was liberated, some of the saints started showing up beforehand. And at a certain point, St. Joseph showed up, and he had a staff, and he started walking around the person that was possessed, pounding the staff into the ground. And every time it would hit the ground, the demon would shudder. And so later I started researching, well, what is the significance of a staff, right? We know it's to correct, in a sense of, you guide the sheep with it, etc. But part of it was also, it's the instrument of justice. It's the instrument of punishment. And so that's why he was shaking every time he would pound that, because that was an indication of that his punishment and justice is about to come. And I think that's actually true. I think part of the reason St. Joseph is kind of showing up at this point is, at least it's my hope, is that we're getting to the end of this stage. Yep. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be hard. And I'm not saying I think it's going to get worse for a little while, but I think it's also, I'm hoping that it's an indicator that St. Joseph showing up, being prominent, especially this year, will be a sign that hopefully within the next year or two, things will start to change, or something will happen. Maybe Our Lady maybe the chastisement will come, who knows?
Well, and that's, you've mentioned this a couple of times, Father, and I know the audience is probably catching this too. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be hard. We talk about, I know there's so much talk about the triumph of Mary's Immaculate Heart. And I would always think a couple of things, and you can correct me if I'm off on this. But number one, the triumph of Mary's Immaculate Heart over evil. Evil doesn't go away quietly. It stomps like a baby, a child, right. Angry, violent child. I think of Revelation 12:12 about woe to you, earth and sea. The devil's been cast down to you in a fury. That idea of a furious, spiritual being just doesn't sound, too friendly. So that's number one, is that there's going to be this violent reaction from evil. And second, would it not be accurate to say, or would it be accurate to say, I guess, more appropriately, that we play a part in Mary's triumph as instruments if we consecrate ourselves to our Lord through Our Lady and St. Joseph? Does that then bring us into this fold of, we're her warriors, her soldiers in the thick of this battle to help and assist as God would desire and plan to be part of this triumph of Mary's Immaculate Heart? Where am I on that?
Yeah, I know. I think you're right. I mean, I do think that there's going to be I think it's going to get worse. I think the panic is going to become more manifest and more extreme, I think, as we go along. Yeah. I think that's definitely coming. And it seems
Yeah,
it is, exactly. Yeah. In fact, sometimes you're like, how much longer can people sustain this psychologically? Right. You start to wonder, but that all being said, I think you're going to see it really intensify. But I think it's also one of those things that if a person is maintain their prayer life, but then also, keeping under Our Lady's mantle, having a strong devotion to her, asking her protection, consecrating your life, the difficulties you're going through, et cetera, to her, et cetera, doing all those things, I think she'll protect you through that process. It doesn't mean you won't suffer a bit, but she'll help to protect you through that. The other part of it is that we will help in the bringing about her triumph, in the sense that we will be her hands and lips and ears, etc. We'll be the ones who will be the ones who practically implement these things, help people to be able to lead these lives that they're supposed to lead, even after the chastisement, after this all hits. We'll be the ones to be able to do that. But we're also, interestingly enough, we're also the instruments of justice to the demons too. Mm-hmm. I mean, by the fact that we combat them, we fight against them, etc. It afflicts them. It makes their life miserable. I mean, we know our side of the equation, and we, because of what the suffering that we go when they attack us, etc. But we don't always necessarily know what they go through. But I can tell you that what they go through is far more intense in their suffering when we say no to them and when we combat them and we fight against them than anything that we actually go through. In fact, I won't go into the specifics or the details, but I actually had one case where all of a sudden I just had, every night I was having this dreaming thing, and it basically was the demon. It took me about 2 weeks to figure out that it was the demon revealing to me what he was going through in the sessions.
Wow.
And it was just absolutely horrific and brutal. And one of the things he really disliked was he would go through this absolute brutal beating, and then I would just stop, walk away. I'm done. Okay, let's go home, and he's sitting here bruised up and bleeding, right? And so, but the point being is that we are the instrument of their justice. But that means that in that sense, we're also the arms and legs of Our Lady in the relationship to bringing about her triumph. We also have to realize that we're her instruments in the sense of, and we're her servants in the sense that it's our place to be praying, to do everything we possibly can to merit it, so that God can say to her, okay, now it's time.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody said recently, I picked up that we need to pray, but like David, at some point you got to pick up that stone.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we have to discern ourselves what God is calling each one of us to do. And,
Right.
I don't think we're supposed to pick up an AR-15 necessarily, but I'm telling you right now, I'm so tired of this. If they start riding in the streets, I'm not going to pick up an AR-15, but I'm very likely going to pick up a big old cross, and I'm going right in the middle of them, because I'm just, and I think a lot of people are like that, Father, right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, we're seeing this coming to an end, because we've decided we're not going to sit in the bunker any longer and just take the abuse, like the marital abuse. We're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, there comes a certain point where there's usually some particular event, at least within a society or historically within a nation, which sets it off, right? It's just like, that was it, boom, and then things take off. Sometimes they're false flags, actually started by the government themselves. Sometimes they're other things, but I'm wondering, at what point will the people say, that's enough of the abuse? We're not going to take this anymore. But I do think that if we can start shifting the narrative and just when people start attacking us, just say, shift the attention, because it's all about the focus. They're the ones trying to control the focus.
Right. Yeah.
Father, I'm curious, when you see things unfold as you have, I mean, you've been at this for a long time. How long have you been involved in this line of work as an exorcist?
I've been doing solemn exorcisms for 15 years. I did a lot of deliverance work, blessings of houses that were infested about 2 years before that.
Okay, so you've seen this. Have you seen it escalate? And have other exorcists said that they've seen things escalate in recent years or the last decade or so? Or how is this in comparison, by your standards, to years ago? I mean, have we seen an increase due to people drifting from God and witchcraft and all this, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, there's a couple of things. I think the number of people that are involved in witchcraft and involved in Satanism has drastically increased.
Right.
I mean, you can just see that just by getting on the internet. I mean, some of the things that people are doing. I mean, and so the numbers are really increasing. I think we're also seeing a number of people who are just, committing grave sin after grave sin after grave sin. And there's just people just aren't leading even normal, decent lives, or just things are getting worse on that level. As far as on the spiritual side of things, what I think I might have mentioned this in one of my other, maybe I didn't mention it with you guys, but what we have noticed is, as it progressively gets worse, as the people continue sinning, and as the world begins to collapse and depart from God, from God's law, the natural law and its government, and even within the church, etc., as that continues to progress, the difficulty of getting demons out becomes more and more difficult. It increases because the demons are more empowered. So it takes more.
I've heard that from other exorcists.
Yeah, it's taking a lot more work just to get just an inch. And that's actually one of the reasons why a few years ago, I actually went to a different kind of a strategy. I used to be like every other exorcist because that's how I was trained, which is, you meet with somebody like once a week or once a month for an hour or two, and then you send them home and they do the prayer, and then you come back. And I realized I wasn't getting anywhere. So I just said, in the past, what they would do is, once a case became clear it was possession, because possession was extraordinarily rare even in the past, what they would do is they would just start the case and they would grind it out day after day after day after day until it finally broke, right? And normally in the past, it might be 1 to 2 days, a week on the outside. The case in St. Louis that lasted 59 days was practically unheard of, right?
Wow.
But today, so I decided, that's the problem. Because I have known that demons are like human beings. They have a psychological threshold. So I thought, well, this is what I'm going to do then. I'm going to go after them every single day for as long as I can. So because of my schedule, because we're trying to start a society and my writing and stuff, basically I came to the conclusion that what I'm going to do is do 2 sessions a day, 5 days a week, 2 weeks a month, month after month after month with the same demon until he cracks. And what we found is it works. And so that's actually how, but it's literally the grind it takes to get to that is becoming much more difficult because people are leading such sinful lives. But it works, but it tells you how much energy and time you have to put into just one case to get anywhere.
You mentioned earlier that, we're not saying everybody's possessed, and they're not.
No.
But there's a huge amount of people who are disconnected from the divine life, right? And then are in the realm of Satan and are easily manipulated by Satan. That doesn't mean they're possessed. It just means they don't have God's protective, sanctifying grace over them, or Mary's mantle. Right. And so they're easily manipulated. Wouldn't you say so, Father?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what the case is. I just finished this. You remember me talking about, I got this gargantuan book I was working on. Well, it's done. Yeah. So I'm finally going to get it to the printers, but I'm going to cut it down for the lay people. And I'm thinking of titling it just called Dominion, because it's really about which kingdom are you under? You're under God or under Satan. There's no mean. So, and what's happening is that if you step under Satan, he just drives you so that his dominion over you becomes more and more powerful. It doesn't mean, like you said, Father, you're right. It doesn't mean you're possessed. Doesn't even mean you're necessarily obsessed. But he's getting more and more power over you in relationship because of all this.
And you're agreeing with him more often, and
that's right.
Allowing all this normalization of evil to just continue to happen. And that grown man can go share that bathroom with that little girl. That kind of thing. Yeah. Easily manipulated.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in fact, the fact that you see people psychologically breaking down is actually a sign that our culture is becoming more and more sinful, because sin is contrary to the natural law, and the minds are structured according to natural law. You keep acting against it, and eventually it's just going to break down.
Yep.
Father, I know this is something that we had Dan Schneider on. We've had him on. I know he's a friend of yours. And he's been on the episode a few times. But I also just recently had him on an episode for the TV show Battle Ready that we do for EWTN. And it's one of our most current episodes. And he says in this, we have actually 3 episodes with him and Jesse Romero talking about these topics here. But he says that in some exorcisms that the demons in effect can say, if you're addressing certain issues about the person's lifestyle or this or that, the demons can in effect say, hey, he invited me in. I'm here because he invited me in. I have the right to be here because this individual has made the decision to open the door to let me in.
That's right.
That's accurate. Can break that down a bit for us, just to understand, again, the seriousness of the decisions that we make and how it's a doorway. It's a portal. It's allowing them in, or we're closing the door by saying no when we pray and fast and go to confession and so forth.
Right.
Can you give a little more expound on that?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it that we should probably take a look at. The first is that there is God established when he created human beings and angels an authority structure. So there's a specific structure that starts with him, of course, at the top, and it goes down. So what happens is every time we sin, we step out from underneath his authority, because his authority is the right to determine. The definition of authority is the right, which is a moral claim. That is, it's a right to make determination about the action or thing, right? So it make determination of disposition. So for example, if I have authority over my gnomes in my front yard, I have a right to determine where I put them in my front yard, right? Okay, so it's a right of disposition. What happens is when you commit a sin, you step out from underneath his authority and step out underneath the authority of Satan. You base not the authority, but the power of Satan, technically, because he's not really an authority structure in the proper sense, because he doesn't have any moral claims technically. Okay, so that being said, but you're stepping out from underneath the authority structure of God and placing yourself under Satan each time you commit grave sin. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why it becomes a problem. The second part of it is every demon that fell, St. Thomas says, he fell. There were several components to it. One is he rejected the task that God had assigned to him. So there was a very specific thing that God asked him to do. And when he sinned, he rejected that task. Now, not the rejection of the task also included the choosing on the side of the demon of its opposite. So so that just gives you an indicator that they chose to choose. For example, this one demon I worked with was supposed to serve Our Lady. He chose to reject her, to hate her, to actually work against her in this life. So they actually choose the actual opposite. So St. Thomas says, and these things, he said, they have a certain kind of specificity. So it's very interesting. I mean, you'll get a demon. All their sins are always spiritual in some sort, whether it's say their pride or envy, one of the two. But underneath that is certain things where they wanted certain things, and so as a result, they didn't get them. Then they choose to basically drive those same kinds of things in human beings. So the particular specificity of the sin of the demon determines the types of things that he drives in people. Now, sometimes demons will drive other things, but it's ultimately they're also driving their own thing. So why am I getting into this? When you commit a sin at the behest of a demon, you're doing it at his suggestion because he's tempting you, etc. Or you're committing the sin, even if it's just from the flesh, because not all temptations are from the devil. Even if it's from the flesh, that particular area of sin pertains to a particular demon or demons. And so they're the ones who actually get control over you in the process of you stepping out from underneath this authority structure, because you're stepping out underneath God. And by your choice, you're placing yourself, you're determining what your disposition is. I'm going to place myself under this particular sin, which is under the domain of this particular demon. So you'll get this, for example, people who, for example, men who suffer from same-sex attraction disorder, if they engage in certain kinds of homosexual acts, then whenever they're possessed, it's sure money that one of the possessors is Asmodeus, who's the demon of homosexuality in men. So the point is that you're underneath that particular demon. In fact, the demons even say this in session, that their goal is to get the possessed person to die in the state of mortal sin, because then the person is under them in hell. Well, the same thing actually applies. And if he got his entry into the person by enticing them to commit this sin, which opens up the door, then just because the door is open, though, it doesn't mean God always allows the demon to step through it. Then once he steps, but if he does step through it, or even if he doesn't, the person is still under his domain. So if they die in the state of mortal sin, the way that the demons talk and the way they behave, at least in relationship to certain people, is that the sin for which the human being is damned determines which demon you're under in hell.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I was just reading about, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically what this means is that opening up the door empowers them. And those are the specific ones that you end up under.
Wow. I was just reading about John Bosco's dream where he got the vision of hell. And so what you were saying maybe triggered me of that. Anyway, as we're recording, the bishops are starting to meet. And I think this will go up either the day they're concluded or maybe the day before. But, Father, I just hang on your every word, and there's just a high level of trust in me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like me. You're just such a credible, holy man. And so can we do a what if here? So what if the bishops invited you to their conference and said, we too have a high level of trust for you, Father Chad Ripperger.
Oh, actually, I can tell you right now.
Tell us what to do. Tell us what to do. And in a spirit of love and obedience and respect for the bishops. What do you? I mean, you must have an idea of what you think the church should, what path the church should be taking at this point. What do you think?
Well, you mean in regards to the bishops?
Yeah, I mean, they would lead this, but what do you feel the bishops should be doing right now? And again, I have a lot of I'm giving them a lot of leeway because I mean we went through a global pandemic, and
right.
The evil's been ushered in. I mean, things like transgender and men in little boys' bathrooms, and that's all like 8 years old at best. This is all ushered in, and so I think they're punch drunk. I think they're like deer in headlights.
Yeah,
and I wish they may have acted, but I have a level of understanding too that this evil's come fast and furious, and so now what do we do?
It's time to break out the ecclesiastical smelling salts. Because the bishops got to get their heads clear. But yeah, exactly. And the thing is that I think part of it really boils down to, by the way, there are bishops who actually, who I do talk with and who do trust me, etc. But a majority of them, probably don't even know who I am. But that being said,
it's a hypothetical.
It's a hypothetical. If they were to ask me to come to USCCB and talk, what I would probably like to talk about, I would take the position of, look, I'm an exorcist, and I can tell you that, and I'll do this for the sake of, because he's a humble man, and I don't think he would want me saying who it was out loud. But there was a bishop actually who came to one of our sessions, and I asked him if he could just impose hands on the woman that was possessed. And as soon as he did, the level of pain that you could see in her was so tremendous. Afterwards, I was talking to her, and she said that because she was possessed, when he imposed hands, she said the pain was worse than childbirth. And what that tells you something is, and obviously she never got that when I would impose hands. So, I mean, it was painful, but not on that kind of a level. But what that tells you is that the spiritual power and authority that the bishops have is so profound, and they don't know it.
I know. I
mean, for example, the demons, the bishop might not even have done anything, but the vitriol hatred that they have for the bishop, whether he's good, bad, or ugly, they just hate him with a passion.
Right.
And so, but it's also, they know that he's the guy that holds the authority in that territory, other than the Pope. He's the guy, and they know that he's the one that they have to shut down and not use his authority in a rightly ordered way, because if they can do that, then it gives them free reign. So I think what I'd like to do is just talk to the bishops about what authority is, what the authority structure is, how it works in relationship to spiritual warfare, their role in it, the power that they actually have in relationship to it, that they could actually start making people's lives better. The impact, by the way, as I mentioned, all grace comes into the world by means of the Catholic Church. The impact that the bishops could be having by saying binding prayers or doing minor exorcisms or what have you over their territory, with the effect of it affecting the political situation, would be tremendous. They could be having huge impact all across the board. But I think that aside from the fact that a lot of them are theologically weak and just don't know, like you said, some of them are punch drunk, but this is just one area that I don't think they've ever really sat back and thought to themselves how powerful they really are. people always ask me, would you want to be a bishop? And my answer is always, no, I don't want to lose 20 points off my IQ. But the answer is actually no. The only appeal that it has to me is if I was going to continue doing exorcism work, it'd be nice to have the fullness of the priesthood to drive these guys out a little more rapidly. But if you're a bishop, then you're stuck in administration, and that's just not my thing. I'm an academic who happens to be stuck doing exorcisms. Yeah. But the point being is that the power that the bishops have is so profound, and the unfortunate thing is they're not using it. Wow. With the exception of a few. There's a few that actually are. Yep. But it's a handful, literally a handful. The rest of them,
listeners have to contact their bishops, and in all humility and great love for their bishops, say, do these exorcism prayers, bishops. Do these binding prayers, right?
Yeah. Although, yeah, that's true. Although I'm sure that if enough people start doing that, they're gonna like, where did this all start? It's that evil Father Ripperger.
That's right. Once again.
Well, you know what's so funny is that the priests either love me or they hate me, of course. But the ones that don't like me, I start talking to, well, you don't even know me. What's and basically their complaint is I create work for them because people want sacramentals blessed, or they want them to bless their house. And so there you go.
I believe it. Yeah, you create a lot of work for me.
But you're a good worker, Father.
Thank you,
Father. For us husbands and fathers out there, and I think it was mentioned earlier, you said that almost no family seems to be going untouched these days with the struggle of either there's problems in the marriage, there's abusive situations, or there's problems with pornography or contraception, or just materialism that's excessive, or excessive sports or what have you. But then, of course, the struggle with children who are either drifting from the faith or cohabitating, and just all of this. What, not just advice, but what recipe can you give us lay people, us husbands, fathers, mothers, wives out there that are out there that really know, we can sense it. We know things are ramping up. What do we do spiritually really to hunker down and engage in this battle all out?
Well, I think that there's one thing that's, there's a couple of things, but one of them is, before people can even see me, because when I was in 2015, when we were keeping the statistics, we had, we had 600 people contact us. Now it's into the thousands, literally every year. But we had 600 people contact us, 150 people we actually saw, right? And so at a certain point, I just said, look, I can't continue doing this because I'm neglecting the people that are possessed to accommodate all this vetting that we have to do. What we did is Dan Schneider's been actually part of that, but we designed a 4-part protocol. And in the first part of the protocol, we just set up people on a regimen of prayer because people are just undisciplined, right? I think that's the real issue, is people are undisciplined. But one of the things we found the most effective in creating a good atmosphere within the home among the parents is if the parents get up and do the Angelus 6, noon, and 6. Wow. There's something about that protects people in the spiritual warfare. We're just starting now trying to wrap our minds around what specifically is that this, and we think part of it has to do with just the discipline. But the other part is when we get to the second phase of the protocol, we start asking him, do you follow right order in your family? Is the father the head of the household? Is the mother subordinate to him in a rightly ordered fashion? Are the children, because it's the dynamic that the parent kids see in that order between the spouses that sets the tone for the order of the rest of the family. And so a lot of the fallout that we're seeing is because there's not right order between the spouses. And that right order just isn't that she does what he tells her to do. It's not just that. It's literally, do they love each other? Do they work for each other's well-being? Do they recognize that their primary obligations are to each other, etc.? And so it's that relationship. So I tell parents, if you want to help your children, first thing you got to do is get your own relationship straightened out. The second part of it is you have to start, and we've talked a little bit about this, they have to pray for the protection of their children on a daily basis, especially today, because the spiritual warfare is so intense that you actually have to be praying every single day for the protection of their children. Then two other things, asking Our Lady of Sorrows, specifically under that title, reveal to me if there's anything I need to know about what's going on in the lives of my children. And the reason being is because a lot of times stuff is hidden and the parents don't know what's going on until it's way down the road, right? So this will be a way for the parents to come to knowledge of it so that it can be addressed more quickly. And then the other part of it is consecrating the family, but also the individual problems in the family and the family members on a regular basis to Our Lady. So in that book, Deliverance Prayers for the Laity, which I put out, which, by the way, I'm in the process of putting that out in a leather cover finally.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. So once that, but the consecration of your exterior goods, if they consecrate their family and the specific problems that they're dealing with in the family, we've found that has a drastic impact in strengthening the family, rooting out the defects and the problems within the family. But then, of course, obviously, is the parents have to have a habitual life of prayer themselves and get the children praying regularly, so that that when they get to those points where the temptations occur, when they start seeing this stuff, they have the discipline of a regular prayer life to be able to fall back on.
Father, real quick, when do parents actually, do we lose authority over our children? They grow up, they move out. When is it that I no longer have authority, spiritual authority over my children's lives?
Okay. It's a bit complicated. So when it comes to male children, once they reach the age of majority, then the child is no longer bound to follow you by virtue of command,
right? Because
of the fact that he has reached the age of majority. He's now his own man.
And that's like, however, what age? That's age 40, 45, somewhere in there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's 18. It's generally considered 18.
All right.
But because of the obligations of the fourth commandment to honor the parents, if you ask him to do something, he should normally do it unless there's a sufficient reason to the contrary, right? So, if you just ask him, hey, could you come over and help me with getting this stuff put away in my garage? He should normally come and help you, unless he's got some other reason, like, sorry, I can't, I got to take my wife because she's giving birth. Okay. So, but the point being is that they should normally do the bidding of the parents unless there's sufficient reason to the contrary, as a matter of fulfilling the fourth commandment. It's a matter of honor.
Okay.
Daughters are a little bit different. Even after they reach the age of majority, according to the natural law, as it was expounded in the Middle Ages, she was still under the father as her head. And it wasn't until she married or entered a convent that the headship was passed from the father to either the son-in-law or to the mother superioress. And the reason for that was because, according to the natural law, it was the father's obligation to protect the honor of the daughter. And that meant she had to obey him in order for that honor to be properly protected. Okay. So they say that he has the right to command. The authority continues in relationship to the daughter until she's married. Then it switches over to, again, that, unless there's a sufficient reason to the contrary, you should only do what they ask. Okay. So that's kind of the general way in which it works.
Is there any spiritual authority, say, to, like, when my children were younger, I could spiritually bind demons and such?
Yes.
Can I still do that at all? Or
yes,
at what age?
Can.
I can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can't, because of the fact of the obligations of them to render honor to you in relationship to the fourth commandment. You continue to have that right to command the demons in relationship to them, even after they're married or in the age of the majority.
Okay.
And part of it, there's two reasons we know. One is that's the theological reason, but the practical reason is, I and a number of exorcists for decades have been watching who says binding prayers and when are they safe and when are they not? When are they getting retaliated against and when are they not? And we just noticed that it follows this line it follows two lines: the authority structure and then the obligations of duty according to the natural law or divine positive law, which is actually in the book that's about to come out. I delineate all that and exactly how it works. And because it's part of the natural law and it comes from God, even though it pertains to our natural law, the demons are still bound to obey it because it comes from God.
Okay. And do mothers also have the ability to bind over their children?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
So when it comes to once the daughter reaches the age of majority, though, then technically speaking, she's not under the authority of the mother, but even though she's still under the authority of the father. Okay. And so, but she should still normally do her bidding unless there's a sufficient reason.
Okay. Okay.
And the mother can command the demons in relationship to the daughter.
Okay, great. How about I'm sorry, Father Hammond, I'm jumping in here. Last question for you. What about, does a grandfather, grandmother have any spiritual authority over the grandchildren, or is that particularly just to the parents then of the child?
It's just to the parents, because it's the right, the way you know they have the authority is basically it's like this. Do I have the authority to tell you to come mow my lawn?
Right.
Well, the grandparents don't. I mean, you would probably do it even as a matter of honor, as a matter of the virtue of piety anyway, but you're not bound by it according to the natural law. And so technically speaking, the grandparents don't.
That makes sense. Okay.